Blessed be everyone. Welcome to another YouTube Live. Today we are talking about opinions. And I've got 5 opinions about witchcraft and, well, Wicca too, included in there, that are probably very common opinions that are interesting because it gives us 2 sides of an argument and things to think about. So I thought I'd present both sides of the argument and then just speak, I guess, from my own experience and my own opinion, I guess. But before we do, welcome to all of those who are watching right now. Say hello in the chat. I'm just going to wait for a minute or two until YouTube gets all the notifications out and people jump in. Hi, Moira, how are you? And introduce myself for those of you who are new to Mystery Witch School and new to the channel. Here you will find lots of videos now on topics such as Wicca, witchcraft, tarot, shadow work, and magic in general. We have a live pretty much every week now at the same time here on YouTube. Hello, Raspberry Moon. Welcome. And this is basically a place where you can come to learn more about Wicca and witchcraft, whether you're practicing or whether you're just curious, and to give you more things to think about, I guess, in regards to the craft, rather than just the typical doing sort of spells and sort of typical things, talking about subjects that involve Wicca and witchcraft as a way of life, as a spiritual practice, as much as it is about trying to create your life the way that you would like to create it. I see the magical path as a connected path. It's connecting us to ourselves, our true selves. It's a path of self-discovery. It's a path of really learning who and what we are. So when it comes to a lot of the content that I put out, it's to help you connect more to who you really are, to connect to your path in a way that brings you joy, in a way that brings you peace, in a way that brings you a sense of love so that you love your life and are able to incorporate that connection to nature, to spirit, to deities, to god and goddess, or whichever deities or spirits you work with, if you work with any at all, and to connect you to your sense of purpose in life and potential. So that's what we do here at Mystery Witch School. And if you are new to witchcraft, or maybe you've been practicing on and off maybe for a while and you'd like to really figure out how you can really utilize this path to bring you that sense of connection, I do have a free video. It's called How to Start Your Witchcraft Practice. And there's a link I've just put in the chat, and there's also a link in the description field below this video, so you can go and check that out. In the description field, I've got links to all my different things, so you can go to my website and check out what I do. I'll talk more about practicing witchcraft on a daily basis and how you can study Wicca and witchcraft with me at the end of the video. So hello Dwight, hello Kay Vance, hello Dante. Videos are so awesome. Thank you, Dante. Okay. And if you want to join in on the comments because you're watching the replay, then certainly join in on the comments and throw in your ideas and your opinions as well. Opinions are just opinions. That's really all they are. And we unfortunately become very attached to them. Sometimes we identify a little bit too strongly with our opinions, thinking that if other people don't agree with our opinions, they're somehow disagreeing with us as a human being. And that's not true. It's just simply they disagree with your opinion. That's all. And you can disagree with someone's opinion and still love them as a human being, still respect them as a human being, and still like them as a human being, and even still be friends with them as a human being, because opinions can change. And they can go back and forth and here and there because they're really just our way of interpreting things at the time and where we're at the time with regards to opinions. So tread lightly with them. Be light with opinion, I guess, is what I'd like to say when it comes to opinion. I've done other videos before on beliefs about Wicca and witchcraft, and these are usually beliefs outside of the craft. So people who don't know anything about Wicca and witchcraft and they're just have these crazy beliefs. A lot of them, of course, come from all of the fiction and Hollywood and Christianity. This is more to do with opinions which are even within the craft itself as much as they might be outside of the craft. Okay, hi Tiffany. The biggest challenge I faced as a witch is finding ways to make the craft accessible to me as a blind person. That would be challenging because of resources. Exactly, finding resources and finding people isn't easy either. Where did your bookshelf with the element signals go? It hasn't gone anywhere. It's still where it always has been. I am in another room at the moment because there's construction going on in that side of my home and there's a lot of noise. So I don't want that interfering with the sound. So I'm actually sitting in a corner in another room. So that's why the bookshelf isn't there. Hello, Tammy. Hello, Cynthia. I'm a new beginner witch. Oh, thank you. Hi, Melanie. Okay, so let's kick off with the first opinion. And I've heard this one, I think this one tends to come more from atheists, but it can also be an opinion of people who are more spiritually oriented, but not necessarily practicing, any particular type of spirituality, like they might be more agnostic or something like that. But this one is that witchcraft is just psychology in disguise, which is an interesting statement. So the general arguments for this is that rituals and spell casting can have a significant psychological impact and benefit, and we know that. And that can bolster confidence, reduce anxiety, help you feel like you've got more of a sense of empowerment in your life. And that's from a psychological perspective. And from a more scientific perspective, viewing witchcraft or any spirituality for that matter through the lens of psychology, it aligns more with the scientism of understanding how the human mind works and making also the craft a little bit more accessible to people who are skeptical. So that's, I guess, an argument for promoting witchcraft as a psychological thing, right? And there is aspects of psychology in all spirituality. In fact, psychology, the way we think, the way we feel, the way we perceive, is like that with spiritual practices. You can't have spirit and psychology. They go together. So yes, there is a psychological element to Wicca and witchcraft, and as there is to all belief systems and all ideologies and all experiences, we cannot put that psychological experience or work on the psyche aside from spiritual practice. It's the work on our psychology is not mutually exclusive to our spiritual work. It's a part of our spiritual work. So whilst I don't agree that it's purely psychological in the more science sense of psychological, it is hugely psychological because our psyche is an expression of our spirituality. It's an expression of how we're experiencing life here on planet Earth. So that is my take on it. But some people sort of see it a little bit, they get offended by the belief that it's just psychology and in disguise, which is I think, a very limited way of seeing things. But the arguments against that is that it strips witchcraft of that mystical and spiritual essence if you're just looking at it from a purely psychological position, and not seeing that whole greater connection to spirit, that greater connection to who and what we are, the connection to nature, the connection to all of the things that we can't normally see, taste, sense, or smell with our normal five senses. And it does. If you're saying it's just psychology in disguise, it's kind of putting that experience down. And I would agree with that. And the experiences of the supernatural phenomena can be very invalidated by people saying that this is just a psychological experience and it's all in your head. So it's an interesting opinion that I've heard it a few times, as I said, mostly by atheists or agnostics or people who are just naturally more skeptical in the way that they think. Some people are quite okay to approach it from that perspective too, but when you really get into the work of the craft and you're practicing on a daily basis and you're connecting on a daily basis, you're changing your beliefs about yourself and the world around you and your perception and everything, and you're starting to really see the benefits, you'll understand that the psyche and the spirit are like that in this lifetime that we're living in, and you can't separate the two. So that's, I guess, where I'm at with that. Okay. Any opinions on transpersonal psychology? It's just another, I guess I would say that it's another way of looking at psychology. It's another way of looking at a way of working with who and what you are, another way of working with trying to find uh, the truth of where things are coming from, like any other psychological method. I haven't done a lot of transpersonal psychology, but it'd be interesting. I'm sure there's some opinions out there about that. So the next one, number 2, is that witchcraft shouldn't be commercialized. So that means not being able to buy things like go on Etsy and buy a wand, or go and get like spell boxes or things like that. I don't know if they're still the rage, but they were the rage quite a few years ago, where you get like a monthly spell kit. And so there's always going to be for and against this idea of commercialization of anything that's of a spiritual or a magical nature. I think a lot of people, on one hand, forget that if you're looking back at tribal times or even villages where there was a cunning man or cunning woman or witches or shamans or whatever they might have been called, that was pretty much their occupation. It is what they did, and there was always an exchange for their services. So that's not something new. But I think what a lot of people get concerned about is that the commercialization of it makes witchcraft more, it sort of, it cheapens it, I guess. And they're concerned about the integrity of the practice and being, of course, reduced to just some sort of consumer trend, which is part of the consumerist world that we live in. There's also concerns that commercialization also can exploit the spiritual practices for profit without actually respecting or understanding the spirituality behind it. And I would go so far as saying that even Hollywood and people that produce, shows and things like that, movies and that, where they're incorporating Wicca and witchcraft, that there's an element of that there. It's like they're not really understanding what it is that they're doing. And I think the interesting thing about these opinions is that you can kind of see both sides of the argument, or at least I can see both sides of the argument. Being liberalizing, I guess, can see both sides of the argument, that there is aspects of truth to two sides, and that's often how the truth is. The truth is often that the truth is on both sides. It can be a paradox almost, the truth, the spiritual truth. So I agree that if you've got big corporations and big companies that aren't of a spiritual nature, they're just producers of stuff, producing a lot of this stuff, then there can be certainly an element of disrespect there and them trying to tap into a trend. But a lot of people that sell witchcraft supplies are witches themselves and practitioners themselves. So they're often crafting things with an intention, and they're producing things from a very connected place to the craft. So, and they're small people, usually one person, a one-person show. So on that hand, there's nothing wrong with that, because that's always been a case in the past. Has been, bartering your skills for something else, and in this case, it's bartering your skills for money or for cash. So personally, I feel that if you're somebody who's in the craft and you're making, craft products, because that's what you do, you're a witch and that's what you do, and that's where your creativity is, and that's where your brilliance lies, then there's nothing wrong with having a business selling your products. It makes perfect sense that you would do that in order to have an income source that is feeding your passion, that's supporting you as you're experiencing your passion, and also giving those things to other people, and giving other people the opportunity to actually have those things. Not everybody's a wand maker. Not everybody can make beautiful jewelry with crystals. Not everybody can do these things. We're all crafty in a different way. And so it's great to be able to go and buy things. I love buying witchy things from witchy stores, or handmade things, or that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I sit with that. There's another argument too, that when you're commercializing products on a bigger, I guess, a broader scene, like I think there was a Wicca Barbie. I'm sure there was a Wicca Barbie somewhere. um, you're actually making it more accessible to the mainstream. And in a way, that can have a positive effect too. It can have a negative one, but it can also have a positive one, because you're normalizing it. You're making it sound like it's more of a normal thing. It's not some scary, horrible thing that you shouldn't get involved in. It's a normal thing. So I think from a broader perspective, it can be almost advertising for the positive aspects of our craft, if what's being sold is of more of a positive nature. Okay. Hi, Vern. Posh. You can't recover your financial investment. At least it's an equal transfer of energy in the form of cash. Unreasonably inflating costs is another matter. Yeah, well, exactly. And as I said, you've got very crafty people in the craft, because it's called a craft. And selling witchcraft related items is supporting the craft in general, because you're supporting those practitioners who relying on it for their livelihood and are giving you something that you want, that you either don't want to make yourself or can't make yourself. So it's about energy exchange, and energy always is about give and take. And so there's that aspect of it. So I guess that's where I sit with that. If it's the big companies, they're just doing it because it's a trendy thing, yes, it can, there's that negative aspects to that. But then the positive side is it's normalizing it at the same time. So we're not considered so weird. And that's a positive aspect. So as I said, there's positives and negatives to all of these opinions. Okay. So number 3 on the list is, this is an interesting argument, because I've heard this a few times, quite a few times now, probably more recently, that the historical witch hunts were misunderstood as targeting actual witches. And I guess that is something that maybe back in maybe the 1960s, 70s, and 80s might have been more of a belief. But we know more from historical accuracy that a lot of the accused, of course, were not practicing witchcraft at all. In fact, probably 90% of them weren't. They were Christians practicing Christianity. They were just simply marginalized individuals. People had a vendetta against them. They might have owned a lot of land that the people who wanted that land wanted to take off them. There was a lot of reasons why we had this mass formation psychology going on back in the Middle Ages with regards to the witch trials. But the majority of people that were lost their lives were not practicing witchcraft, most likely. So that's something that we do know. So it was a complex time. It was a lot. There was a lot of anxiety around at that time. There was a lot of fear around at the time because of the conditions that they were living in at that time. I think there had been some kind of major catastrophe that had happened in the Northern Hemisphere at that time. So when people en masse go into fear, and you've got the political power, which at that time were pretty much the church, pushing something like let's blame the witches for everything, and bringing that in as a way to control and dominate and subjugate and take all the power and all the wealth for themselves. And people are in such a state of anxiety and fear, and it creates this mass formation psychology, which sometimes we call mass hysteria. And people just blindly follow the narrative, blindly, because they're too afraid not to. So in the Middle Ages, that happened, and people would be blaming people left, right, and center. If somebody got ill, it was some witch's fault. If there was an outbreak of some disease, it was the fault of witchcraft. That even happened during COVID. Like, witches were blamed for that in some places. We were blamed for COVID in some places. So yeah, it still happens. But I guess the some critics, though, would want to say, yeah, even though the majority of people were not necessarily practicing witchcraft, you don't want to minimize the suffering and the persecution of anybody who was accused, and even the ones that may have been practicing witchcraft or folk magic. There's also an element of romanticization of the victim as well. So sometimes it's because I certainly saw this when I was first learning witchcraft, and it was still more of a trend to believe that most of the people who were killed were witches, that it kind of you can kind of romanticize the tragedy of it and then carry that trauma with you when you don't want to be carrying that trauma with you. And the persecution trauma is something we have to let go of and try to move through. Okay. Thank you, Not Queen, for the super chat. Thank you. It really helps, especially at the moment. Okay, number 4. Modern witchcraft lacks rigor and discipline. Now, this would be coming from the oldies and people who practiced it when it was probably more connected to the more ceremonial, magical connection. So the arguments for this opinion are that more disciplined approach respects the depth and history of traditional practices, and there's an element of truth to that. There's an element of truth to that. There's an element of truth that tradition has its place. It certainly does. Tradition is an important thing to know, and there's elements of tradition that are still applicable even as we progress through life and through consciousness and through our growth as human beings, that tradition can certainly have its place. But we humans don't stay the same all the time. We're evolving consciously. We're learning more and more about who and what we are by the day. And we're learning in very many different ways. It's not just the magical community now that are dealing with this. It's expanded into the it expanded into the new age community. It's expanded into the self-help communities, and not that they're really communities, but everybody uses that term. But those niches, I guess you could say, and that is where the progression needs to happen. That's when we need to progress with the new information and the new understanding of things, and not get stuck and fossilized back in the past. When we fossilize into a tradition, we get stuck. And that's where all the dogma comes in, and all of the things that may have been useful back then, no longer useful now. There's other ways of achieving it now. So tradition's got good stuff in there, but we always have to look at it and go, what is still working, what is still relevant, and what might not be. Arguments, again, for sticking to rigorous tradition is that it can lead to a deeper understanding and a more effective practice of the craft. Again, there's elements of truth to that for sure. It's like, I guess, if you're learning a musical instrument or you're learning music, you learn all the conventions of music. And then once you know the conventions, you can then go and break them because you know how to break them well, and you know how to break them in a way that can really help you play music in a really wonderful way. So it can be a bit like that. The arguments against it, though, is that rigor can create barriers to entry, of course, making it less inclusive and more elitist, because things that were the norm back in the day are not that now. And things that were acceptable from a social point of view, I guess, back in history have changed now. And that modern witchcraft has evolved to fit more contemporary lifestyles and needs, which doesn't always align with historical practices, and that's true too. Our lives change, things change, everything's different. We're learning more about the world. We have quantum science now. We have other ways of even explaining magic. There's other terminology to explain these things. There's other movements. Like the human potential movement and other various movements that were working with magic all the time, but they just weren't calling it magic. So it's understanding that tradition has value, but we also need to look at what's going on in the current times and what's needed in the now, rather than sticking rigidly true to tradition and fossilizing like all of the other religions out there that are fossilized back in the past with their fundamentalism. And as a being fundamentalist, I actually start to become destructive because they're stuck and they're not moving, they're not flexible, they become rigid. And then when something's rigid, it can be a lot more destructive and probably less resilient. Okay, hi Nick. It was the little ice age and a bunch of crops failed because of the messed up freak weather. Yes, that's right. And it just threw everybody into desperation. Everyone went into survival mode. And when we go into survival mode, we become very suggestible. We're looking for someone to save us. And in the modern era, it's the government and all of the officials and everybody that come out of the woodwork and tell us this, that, and the other. And then, of course, we find out, years later, maybe 5 years down the track, 10 years down the track, that they didn't really know what they were doing. After all, they were just making it up or they were wrong. And a lot of suffering can often happen as a result. And that would have been the case with, certainly was the case with the witchcraft persecutions as well. But they were very, very sinister. Byrne says community revenge on witches actually resulted in deaths in the American Southwest as late as 1930. it scared people to doing horrible things. Yes, yes. It's still happening. Look what happened. The last 4 years. We've had we've had apartheid in Western countries that we never thought that we would have had before. Um, you know, we've had medical apartheid. So we're still vulnerable, and we as a collective, we haven't understood that. We haven't understood just how suggestible we are. And it you never know when the tables could turn. Like, yeah, in most places now, it's probably safer to be a witch than it was, say, even 50 years ago. But those tables can turn. When you've got very polar political views and ideologies, which we have out there at the moment, they're like polar opposites. So opposite that they're almost exactly the same, really, in the tyranny, that it can swing, the pendulum swings, and it could swing back. So there's always that concern, I think, for me anyway, as a witch, I have those concerns. Because people can think, okay, witchcrafts are all nice and dandy, but then when something starts going wrong, and they've got this old upbringing and belief system of, maybe fundamentalist Christianity, that it's not going to take much for them to go back to that, oh, it's all the witch's fault. If they've got a very charismatic leader telling them that. Okay, let's go to number 5. Number 5 is witchcraft and religion. Actually, did I finish that one? I think I was just... Yeah, I didn't finish that one. So, no, I did finish that one. I'm just looking at my notes because I write my notes down now so that I stay on track. So we are up to number 5 now, which is the final opinion. Look, there's heaps of other opinions out there too. I just tried to choose ones that were probably the more common ones. That witchcraft and religion should be separate. So this is an interesting one because witchcraft, to me, is an umbrella term. It's a practice. It's a way of life. It can be a religion, but it doesn't have to be a religion. So I kind of see it as being optional, whether you want to see it that way or not. But some people have very strong opinions about it not being a religion in and of itself. And often witchcraft is a practice usually within other religions or other spiritual contexts. So people who believe that it should be separate, that witchcraft and religion should be separate, just emphasize that the skills of the witch, the techniques of witchcraft, is a witchcraft thing. It's something that witches do, like spells and magic, and the way that we do spells and magic it should be emphasized rather than religious beliefs or any of that side of things. And separating witchcraft from religion can make it more appealing to those who are spiritual but not religious. Okay, so I see that witchcraft, and again, for me, I see them as being something that can be separate or they can be together. And I think in the cases of this, they're often talking about Wicca, because Wicca is technically a religion, whereas witchcraft isn't. And Wiccans practice witchcraft, and Wiccans call themselves witches. So I think that can be a little bit of where that argument is. So I think witchcraft is still very appealing to people who don't want to be Wiccan or don't want to be religious. It's out there for everybody to practice and to do. Nobody's saying you have to be religious about it, or that it even has to be a spiritual practice for that matter. I personally like to use it that way because I see the benefits of it and I experience the benefits of it. But if you're just really wanting to just stick to witchcraft in its more traditional magical sense, then go for it. The arguments against that are that many people find that their religious and spiritual beliefs are deeply entwined with their witchcraft practice, so you can't separate the two. And that's the case with me. How do I separate the two? Because they're the same. They're working within together. They're blended, and some people will argue that it can add cultural richness and depth to the practice too if you're blending, say, spiritual practices in with your witchcraft practices. Again, it depends on what your path is and where you're at with your spirit, where you're at spiritually, and what you want to do. I don't think there should be any hard or fast rules about whether you should have religion or you shouldn't have religion. I think, again, when it comes to spirituality and it comes to magic, it's you come to it for the reasons you come for it, and you do the practice the way that the practice enlivens you. And for some people, that's religion and spirituality. And for other people, it's more the craft and magic and that way of working with the craft, or working with the craft in more of in a practical way. There was a quote I don't know if anybody here has read or is old. I don't know how old everybody is, but Carlos Castaneda wrote a lot of books back in, I think it was the 1970s. And one of the quotes from one of his books was that his so-called teacher or mentor was a shaman. And he said to him that sorcery which is what he called it in English, isn't spiritual, it's practical. And when you look at witchcraft itself, it is practical. It's a practical thing. You're doing things for practical outcomes. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on a more spiritual, however you want to define that, aspect. Yet when you read any of that stuff, like the Castaneda stuff or any of the shamanic stuff, it's to me, it's incredibly spiritual. So I guess it depends on how you define it. But religion tends to be something that has a form, and it has a recognizable form, and you practice certain rituals and things within that recognizable form. And Wicca is an example of a form that has a structure and a certain way of practicing that incorporates a lot of witchcraft in there. And Wicca has brought witchcraft out more into the public awareness. It has given people more of a positive opinion of witchcraft. So it certainly has had a lot of benefits, even if you don't particularly like that form, or you don't want to participate in that form, or you've had bad experiences with groups that are practicing that form in a particular way, because there's different ways of practicing Wicca too. There's not one Wicca fits all. There's different schools of Wicca or different traditions of Wicca too. So yeah, that's where I stand on that one. And that was number 5. Okay. Can you be religious and worship a stick? But spirituality is, you can be religious and worship a stick, but spirituality is on a much deeper level. Absolutely. Exactly. Religion's a form, right? And people get caught up with believing that the form is the thing. So I like to use an analogy of a cup. Okay, you have a cup, and you can have a lovely cup. And if you're somebody that does a lot of pottery or very crafty, you can make some beautiful cups, right? You could probably make beautiful things. And we can look at the cup and go, wow, that cup is just so beautiful, and really love the cup. But the cup in and of itself, it's there to contain something. It's there to put something in, right? Usually, water or some sort of beverage or whatever you want to put in the cup. So a cup is meant to contain something, and what's actually in the cup is actually what is important. It's the cup's that's there to contain it. And you can get different looking cups, different sizes, different shapes, just as like you can get different shapes of religions. And people are going to have a preference for one or the other. But it's not the cup or the form that is where the juice is. The juice is in what goes in the cup. We're going to drink from the cup, so we have to have something in the cup. And that's the spiritual essence. That's the going deep. That's where the practices bring in that connection to self, that connection to the universe, the connection to all and everything, and where we start to do the work of discovering who and what we really are. It's the stuff that's in the cup, not the cup itself. And a lot of people just get caught up on the surface aspect of religion and focus on the cup, and the cup has to be a certain way, and you can't do it any other way, or it won't be that cup. And forgetting that it's actually the essence that's important. The cup's there to contain it. And form is very useful. I use form in the Mystery Witch School Academy. So when I'm teaching Wicca and Witchcraft, which is my 12-month course on witchcraft, I use a form because it's very difficult to do spiritual practices without some kind of container to do them in, like a ritual to do them in. A ritual is a form. A ritual is a cup. It's got a structure. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you do stuff because that's going to contain what you experience through the ritual. So that's why I use it when I teach with Mystery Witch School 101 Academy. So that is so that if you're doing Mystery Witch School 101 Academy, you're on a daily basis using a form or a structure in order to practice something, in order to have an experience over time as you practice, in order to learn energy work, for example, and build energy and feel energy, to understand the circle work and how the circle contains energy and how you can build energy in that circle. Using magic, how you can work with the lunar energies, work with the solar cycle or the seasons of the year, the Sabbats, and it contains a form in order for you to be able to have those experiences. So that's why I work with Mystery Witch School the way that I do. So if anybody wants to learn Wicca and Witchcraft with me, the Mystery Witch School is there for you. It gives you a form and it gives you a structure that you can work within in order to experience stuff. You don't have to stick to the form. It's just there because it's useful, and I've found it useful for me. And it's there to give you the experience, and it's the experience that you're wanting. It's the outcomes that you're wanting from the ritual, not the ritual itself. So I will actually put a link in the description field below this video for anybody who wants to learn Wicca and Witchcraft and you're looking for a mentor, you're looking for somebody who can help you, because that group's an online group. We do meet twice a month on Zoom to get together and be a community, and to also practice lunar rites and guided meditations as well. So they can have the guided meditations are really great for connecting you back to yourself again and for helping you understand things too, and to help you maybe solve problems or to get you in touch with your subconscious mind and get you in touch with your intuition. So we do those twice a month as well. And the coursework is something you can do in your own time and work on a monthly basis. So there's a link there in the description field below this video to the Mystery Witch School 101 Academy, and I've also put one in the chat as well. Okay. The people who started the live eventually admitted to making it up. I was shocked by this. Yeah. Yes. I know what you're talking about. Yes. Yes, it's that's come out just recently. So remember that your path is your path, and to always be aware when you're in a state of fear versus when you're in a state of connecting to your power or your witch power or your witch self. And always look at your reactions to things and the way that you yeah, the things that you do, the things that you say. Is it a fear reaction, or is it something that's coming from my sense of connectedness and feeling empowered? And that, because witchcraft, magic in general, is about us tapping back into our power and being who we truly are, which is magical beings. We're divine magical beings. And the people that often want power and control don't want people to know that, and they don't want people to practice that, because then they can't have the power and control. So that's why another reason why witches magic is being persecuted, and more than just in the West. There's been persecutions in other parts of the world as well to people who are magical or go against the religion or the ideology of the religion at the time as well. Okay, are there any other names this practice can be called in public other than witchcraft? Well, you could call it sorcery. I know there's some that refer to it as sorcery, but then sorcery doesn't have a particularly good reputation either, name-wise. Some people call it magic work. I've heard it referred to as magic work or being a magic worker. I guess it kind of makes it feel less, kind of makes it a little bit more like you're a social worker or something like that. There's yeah, sorcery. Yeah, it's a bit hard because witchcraft is witchcraft. So it's a bit hard to really call it anything other than what it is: sorcery, witchcraft, magic. Okay, yeah, it's a tough one. If you find one, Nick, let me know. What's the difference between witchcraft and Santeria? Okay, I'm not overly familiar with that, so um, my understanding is that it's a hybrid of Catholicism and whatever the more traditional beliefs and religion would have been in that area with the local people in that area. That's a hybrid, and that the witchcraft is certainly a part of it. So it's I guess it's an example of a religion that has witchcraft within it, that still practices witchcraft. Um, so it's just an example of how witchcraft can be incorporated into many, many, many different religions and different practices. Even Catholicism, standard Roman Catholicism, still got witchcraft in it. Okay. Sandra's Witch School has helped me so much. I'm very busy, but have made time each morning to do my intentions and meditation, and I've made great progress. Awesome. Hi, Dolly Nelson. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Awesome. Yes, it's something I think I wish that I'd had more of when I was in the covens, was to have more. We did have a daily practice, so our high priest did give us daily practices to do, but they weren't as connected as I wanted them to be, or I would have liked them to be, and I didn't understand why at the time. You know, I was in my early 20s. I really didn't know much about any of that sort of stuff. So I found daily ritual practices just to be a great way to connect. Okay. I was thinking go with spiritual or maybe pagan. A lot of people do use pagan. Yep. A lot of people refer to themselves as pagan because it's got less of it's a little bit more general, and it's not necessarily associated with witchcraft, because you can be a pagan and not be practicing witchcraft, I think. And a lot of the time people don't even know what any of these things are. Like, if you might tell them that you're pagan, they don't really understand what pagans are. They've lived a very sheltered existence. But yeah, if you use the word witch, everybody knows what a witch is, of course, because it's been such a big part of our culture in a negative way. Okay, wonderful people. So thank you very much for coming along today. I hope that this was helpful to you and maybe got you thinking about ideas and opinions, and how there's often two sides to an argument. And the idea, I guess, of arguments is that you're really just putting forth ideas and perceptions. And when you do that, you get other people putting forth their ideas and perceptions that maybe you never thought of before. And then that can help, shape the way that you think about things. I think in our culture at the moment, we're so polar, like we're so divided, and it's this side or it's that side. It's either black or it's white, for example, uh, that we've forgotten there's a whole lot of color and shade and shades of gray even in between. And being too rigid to a particular ideology or opinion without allowing ourselves the courage to be able to go, it's what am I afraid of by not considering that other person's opinion? Is that threatening me in some way? Do I feel threatened in some way? And when it comes to arguing opinions, it's about arguing the opinion itself, not the person who's having the opinion, because people's opinions can change, and you can be a good person and still have an opinion that maybe just not well thought of or well understood or well informed, that kind of thing. Okay, so Melanie, is it possible to feel the need to connect into witchcraft almost as a gnawing feeling, gauging gnawing feeling, to feel the need to connect as a gnawing feeling? If it's something that you're wanting to really connect with, if it's sort of something that you feel is gnawing at you, it depends on how it's gnawing at you. But it sounds like it's something that's calling you. Then, yeah, it calls people in different ways. It really depends on you as a person how you'll get called to it, or called back to it, um, or called to realizing that that's what you fundamentally, our nature is magical. And it's like the part of you knows who and what you are, and it's that part of you that knows that's asking you to investigate that part of you again, and step into that part of you, to being you again, being that part of you again, or you again. It could be something that's come past from past lives as well. Yeah, I saw it as just simply a feeling of coming home. It felt like this is home, and that's the only way I can describe it. And it wasn't like it was. It just happened. It just happened from associating a carving of a woman sitting on a cauldron that was a part of a house, to remembering a book that I'd read back when I was 14, which I just recently rebought a copy of. And it was like in that moment I was ready, because it brought back the memory of the book. And at that point, it just felt like now is the time. Go to that bookshop, start investigating it again. And then when I started reading it, which was Scott Cunningham's book, The Truth About Witchcraft Today, it felt like a home. It was a homing thing, a calling home. Yeah, so that's how I experienced it. Okay, yes, call back to it. Cool, yeah, it's best being called home. It's like coming home after a lifetimes maybe of not being able to, or been having to suppress it, or maybe, or even of your life and upbringing and culture of just feeling like something's missing, something's wrong. And then you look at it, you learn about it, and you feel like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. This is home to me. Okay, so thank you very much for coming along to the live today. I will see you all again, hopefully next week at the same time. So have a wonderful week, and blessed be.